Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome, and this is Tony Sherman, your host with Impact Teams Radio. Today we have a returning guest in Fabio Agostini, and today Fabio and I are going to be discussing cross-cultural leadership and international business. So welcome back, Fabio.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. So we learned a lot from Fabio last time about working in cross-cultural environments, when he was saying that he had a lot of subject matter experts and consultants working in Dutch and German and Spanish and obviously Italian, and the different styles that they have to work in. But a lot of our audience here, Fabio, are American. So let me start with the first question, Fabio. What do you see when you're working internationally with the difference between European cultures? And again, I've just taken the four that I mentioned and lumped them into one, and you've already explained that they're quite different. But what's the difference between European culture and the American culture?
That's an interesting question. I think that the main difference is that Europeans are much more used to the fact that other kind of people, other culture in the world. Why? When you go to America, they believe that there is only one culture, their culture. That's pretty good for you, I guess, but makes it difficult when you're not American, you know.
Actually, that's very funny. I'll just tell you a quick story about that. I was working in Zoetermeer in the Netherlands, setting up IBM's global international help desk for their large customers. And we had a third-tier support that was based in, I think it was New York, White Plains. And anyway, so I end up on the phone over this technical issue for a customer, and he says, "Where are you?" And he says, I said, "I'm in Zoetermeer." And he says, "Oh, what state is that in?" I said, "That's not a state. That's in Holland." And he goes, "Holland? What state is that in?" And I couldn't get it out of his head. It wasn't a state. It was a different country in a different time zone.
Exactly.
Oh, it's funny.
So I will tell you another story. It's very difficult to make an American understand what is an international country code, you know. Because they say 554, it's enough.
Yes, exactly.
Now, what is +1? That's +1.
Yes.
The national country code for USA, you know. They call the number directly. Everything is connected.
It is, yes, exactly. When you have those differences, and the Americans tend to approach things as a monoculture, whereas Europeans naturally have a nuanced approach to that, how do you handle that when you're dealing with the American component of your business?
But you have to explain them, especially by example, that other point of view can exist and another approach can exist to a lot of existing problems.
So what does that do in terms of communication? How does that impact the way you communicate? And I'm just talking about not just email, although that's important, but also how do you do that in managing your network across different cultures?
Other than, first of all, the most important part is not email, of course, but we try to meet and to talk each other. Every time I am in USA, I go to visit each of my colleagues. I spend a time every day in their office. I talk to them, I invite them for dinner, I invite them for a drink. We try to do activity all together just to mix up. I try to show them picture of international place. Eventually, I tell them stories. I cook for them different food. And so those are all the kind of things that make them aware that a different culture can exist. I explain to them how we manage some kind of problem in different region. I try to do them things that you do one way in another way, just to show them how this work. So little things, you know.
Actually, you say little things. That sounds like a lot of work. Do you sense that that's a good investment of your time?
Absolutely. That's the best investment, especially in USA, because you are very social people. I was impressed by that. And so if you don't get the trust from the people you work with, it's very difficult, you know. Of course, you respect much more the authority than we do in Europe, but that said, you should, the example way works always. If you show them that you do the thing yourself, that you participate, that you care about them, you listen to them, you talk to them, you try to explain, that's much different way of work, because what I learned in USA that time to time you have to be very directive, especially with some people that really needs clear input and get confused if you try to show them different alternatives and let them decide and they got a little bit confused. In Europe is much different, especially in Italy. You can't give a direction to one person and say, please do that, and that's it, because they will never do that. You have to explain them why, how, if there are alternatives, discuss, ask them what do they think, if they think there is another way, and then you have to convince them that their way is not so good, the other one is better, etc., etc. So you lose a lot of time. In USA, they really appreciate that, but at the end of the day, they ask you, and so what I'm supposed to do, please tell me. And some people feel much more comfortable. That's tough.
Right.
They think that discussing is nice, but they need clarity in the direction. That was I saw. But they appreciate to be dealt as human beings and not only as a. So I think that the mix is it's very, very interesting. I have a very good team in the States, to be honest. I really appreciate it.
So actually, the funny thing, what you were saying about people being appreciate to being brought into the conversation. A couple of months back, we had Vijay on the show. He's a CIO in MongoDB, and he was saying that one of his bugbears was that people in America call their team members human resources and treat them more like resources than people. So he actually, if you were working with him, I think you and Vijay would get on very well, because he definitely likes the human approach to people, including teams, and making sure they've got a deeper understanding.
Education is fundamental in the States, for sure.
Yeah. So when you're doing that, you did mention on the previous episode that we did about the differences in culture, that you can compensate for that. But one of your struggles was, or one of your challenges was time zones. How do you cope with time zones? And let's start with you physically as a man, because if you're doing all this bouncing around visiting your teams, you must have to struggle with jet lag quite a lot. Is that a real issue for you?
It was the first 3 times, to be honest, and now it's not a problem. I sleep when I have to sleep, but it doesn't matter which is the time and the hour. So, but usually when I'm in the States, I usually work on the East Coast in Florida. And what I do, I wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and I try to go to bed at 9:30, 10 maximum, so that I keep at least 3 hours of my time zone. Instead of shifting completely to the other time zone. But we had project when we had to work all the night for the move of some offices. So, but you get acquainted to the time zone. When you travel, this is not a big issue. The bigger issue is that when you have international team, you get call, email, and you have to answer email on a very wide time spread, because I work when I'm in Europe. I work in the morning and in the afternoon in Europe. But then the USA starts at noon my time, at 2 p.m. usually, and then they go on till midnight, and you continue to be bombarded by email and requests till midnight, and so I have to answer anyway. And that's the tough thing about time zone. You never stop, and you cannot avoid to answer. So you are on duty for a much longer time than you are if you work only in one time zone. Working internationally in Europe is pretty easy, because we are more or less all on the same time zone. Working in USA, you have 3 hour difference, not that bad. But working in a truly international environment where you have 6 to 9 hours with USA and 10 in the other direction with Australia, that's really tough.
At some level, if you're always on, you're going to burn out. How do you personally manage? Because and here's my question, because I would love to know how you manage this. What I struggle with when I'm working across large time zones, like working with European colleagues, is on large projects that are going on for more than a couple of weeks, so multi-month, potentially multi-year projects. I struggle with setting up the meetings and being inclusive and not burning people out by asking either the American team to get up very early all the time, or asking, even worse, the European team to be eating into their evening every single week. I really don't know how to handle that one really effectively. I try my best, but what are your techniques? How do you handle that?
I keep my PC on the American time zone and my other device, including my clock, on the European one. So I've always the two time zone on the same screen. And I have a clock. In all the office, we have clock with all the time in all the office. But we know we are so used to that this is not a big issue. We know that we have to do a meeting in the afternoon in Europe, that is morning in the States. But after that, it happened to me to go to the office in the States at 2 a.m. just to do a video conference with the European team, or do the opposite, make a call at midnight in Europe, because the meeting was at that time. But again, we are a virtual company anyway. I can work from home, I can work from an airport, I can work everywhere. We have a very nice device. We have a special Jabra device, the one that I'm using now, the one that I use usually when I travel, that speaker and microphones, they can be connected to iPads that we always use to be connected when we travel, or your phone, or your PC. I keep 3 phones with me. One is the USA, one is a French one, and the other is the Italian one. And so that's how you do it. We have a video conference, so presence is not so important. And we just set our main meeting room in Monaco, that is at our headquarters, with 270-inch TV. So on one we can have all the other office on the same screen, on the other we can have the presentation that we share, and we have the same configuration all over the world in other offices. The only tough thing is when we have to do a meeting with Australian, American, and European. There is only one time, 8 in the morning, if I remember, or late in the night. I don't remember exactly, because we do it very seldom. That's the only really tough thing. Otherwise, we do 2 separate meetings. Sometimes we record the meeting and we share the recording with the other team. That's it.
Okay, so when you do that then, do you have a culture in your company? So let's talk something you and I work both from different angles. So if we're working America, Europe, do you find that you keep your teams in Europe, they keep their mornings open for American meetings and they don't fill them up with European meetings so that they have got time available? Or do you just see how it goes when the demand arises?
We have a very tough schedule for all the meetings, so we manage our agenda, of course. But on the rest, no, we are pretty open, because we call each other every time we need. Remember that we are on duty 24/7 also in USA, because they manage all the vessels that are spread all over the world. So they are pretty used. To be honest, on my team, we do not have a rule that requires that you are in person anywhere. So in USA, especially, my team wakes up at 5 usually. They start chasing the email at the side of the pool. They come to the office for a few hours and they go home eventually, and they work at home. But if I write to them when it's 3 a.m. Their time, usually they answer too, because they know that it can be important.
Wow. I mean, so you have a high availability ops team, basically. Everybody's expected to have that high availability approach.
Yeah, but I exchanged the flexibility in the presence in the office with this flexibility in the time availability. And we respect everyone. So I have some nice episode eventually. We have a colleague that got a breast cancer, and we helped him working, and he helped us during his chemo, and he did an incredible job. We had to do the move of the office. He came to the office during the chemo, and he came with something to sleep on the floor, and we respected him, and he tried to help anyway. And then we did everything for him just to be sure that he could be comfortable. And that's the kind of respect that build a team. And that's nice, I have to say.
Yeah. So,
of course, when he was in the hospital, we all went to him to try to support him. Now he's good. So he was lucky enough to pass through this experience in a pretty decent way. But
so if you take that Yeah, obviously you've built up a team that has a sense of loyalty, high availability, you respect people, and obviously your team put a lot in. But there must be conflicts that you have to manage. How do you manage the cross-cultural conflicts and cross-time zone conflicts? How do you manage that within your team?
I'm the one that travels most and knows better all the culture, but for example, we had 2 Europeans living 3 years in the States. We have a corporate apartment close to the office that we share time to time. I have all my team travel in all other office. That's what I said, just to let them know, let them do things together and familiarize so that they can get used to the different culture. Most of my people visited all the offices, so they know in person all the other colleagues. And that's number one. Number two, I always try to explain the point of view of the other people to other guys so that they can better understand the difference in culture. And every time they have a conflict, I try to let them solve the conflict by themselves, telling them what can be convenient or asking them what they would like to do, and eventually listening to what they are saying without being heard, and things like that, more or less. I have conflict, of course, because I have 3 direct reports that are really good and think to be really good, and of course they have some friction one with the other. I have friction time to time with other people, but nothing really serious.
It's funny though, in both the previous episode and this episode, you've put a strong emphasis on the personal relationship side and knowing the person as a person rather than just as a work colleague virtually.
That's Italian culture,
Okay, so that is just something that springs out of who you are as an Italian.
Yeah, but the team absorbed some of this, and we absorbed the enthusiasm and the communication that you Americans have that's much higher than ours, and the fact that you can really enjoy life, you are very organized, you can work in team that in Europe is much more difficult to get, and so I think working international is pretty good because you mix everything all together and you get the best out of each culture. More or less.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the mark of good leadership, is getting the best out of your team. Because the other thing is, if you don't manage it and you don't lead it, and what you said in the previous episode was, but being very strict with yourself about leading by example. If you don't do that, you could end up with the worst from each culture, and that would be horrendous.
Yeah, exactly. I have to tell you a story, if you like. When we had to do the move, at the end, we have to move the UPS out of the rack, and there was one that was very heavy, and so the Americans said, we cannot do that, it's too heavy, we have to ask to call some movers with some equipment that can do it. And I said, no, we do not have time, we absolutely have to move it. And they say, how can we move it? I said, okay, I will try to put my hands below the equipment so we can try to lift it. And they said, you are crazy, that would never work, you risk to break your hands. I said, don't worry, I will manage it. I went to the gym very often, and indeed we did it. I take one side, I take the other side from the top, and we lifted it, and we put it on something that enable us to move it.
Okay, yeah, on a dolly, yes.
Yes.
Again, that goes to leading by example as well. So as we draw this to a close, Fabio, I just want to step out and just talk, because you've taught me, learn about the person. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about your favorite books, your favorite hobbies, that kind of stuff. So what kind of books do you like to read?
I was, to be honest, because now I don't read a lot of books, but I was a big reader of science fiction. My favorite author was Isaac Asimov.
I noticed that in some of the email exchanges you mentioned the Foundation trilogy.
But the one that I love most is The Naked Sun. That's different.
I haven't read that. Is that an Asimov book?
Yes, absolutely. It was interesting because it talked about different culture that I read it 30 or 40 years ago. But it talk about the things that are really happening today. This planet has very few inhabitants, and they were not used to physical presence, but to virtual presence. They talk to each other, looking at the wall where the image of the other people was projected. That's what we do nowadays with video conference, more or less. That was incredible. And one was murdered, and it was astonishing for them because they thought, who can be so dare to be in presence of the person just to kill him, because it was not usual.
Okay, don't tell me anymore. I'm actually going to, if that's on Kindle, I'm going to put that on my book.
Before our age, they did the same thing. He thought about the same thing that are happening today.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I wrote other favorite authors, Leonardo da Vinci, if you know him. He wrote a lot of sentences that are very, very, very nice.
That's the, I can't even say the word.
Aphorisms.
Aphorisms, that's it. Okay.
Yes, small sentences.
So what about hobbies? I mean, obviously cooking. You mentioned that you cook for your team.
As I always said, I'm very big, obese, to be honest. And I always say that I cooked myself for my belly, you know. One. Number two is photography. I really would like to travel, to walk, and to take pictures. I do street photography. I do freestyle cooking. That's cooking, not following a recipe. Street photography is you walk around and you try to shot whatever looks cool to you.
I'm sure everybody listening to this right now is thinking the same thing. Do you get free cruises?
Yes, we do. I do. As an employee, I'm entitled to get one free cruise per year with my family, but to be honest, in 5 years, I never did that because I travel, of course, and I go to the ship for work. And I did a lot of cruise in the past with different cruise line, but now seems to be work. So,
well, just if ever you're struggling with what to do with that free cruise, Fabio, remember my name. Okay, my wife and I love cruising.
Funny. No, I have to go before or after, but I don't take a lot of vacation. Unfortunately, since I travel a lot, and my family, or part of my family is still in Italy. Every time I have time, I try to go home and spend time with my children. And previously with my wife. Now my wife is with me, but for 4 years she lived in Italy with the children. And I still have parents very sick, and so unfortunately during the few vacations that I can manage, I have to go there. But I'm lucky enough because for travel I go to Sydney, I go to London, I go to Frankfurt, I go to Galapagos, I go to Guayaquil, Fort Lauderdale, you know, all sunny place. Monaco, that's an incredible place in Europe.
On this closing note, you've just made every listener jealous of you, Fabio. Well done.
I'm very lucky. Thank you.
You're a very lucky man. Fabio, I just want to thank you so much for spending some more time with us today.
It was a very nice experience. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Impact Nation, if you're out there listening, I hope when it comes to cross-cultural stuff and time zones, you were taking as many notes as I were, and that you've got a lot of value out of this interview. I know that I did. And until next week, this is your host, Tony Sherman from Impact Teams Radio.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.